Welcome to GONKCAST, a long-form discussion podcast about the music of English electronic duo Autechre, album by album, EP by EP. I'm Gabe.
I'm Dan.
And this is a bonus episode about your emails. We're always going to try to work as many listener emails into our main episodes as possible, but if we receive too many, as we did in the run-up to our last episode on Try Repete, we've decided we'll package the leftovers together with one or two minor releases we would have otherwise skipped, and drop a little bonus episode like this one. So this week, in addition to your emails, we're going to tackle the Basscad EP, released in 1994, even though it remixes a track from 1993's Incunabula. First, though, I want to remind you that if you've got any Autechre opinions or hot takes to share, we want to hear them. Email us, gonkcastpod@gmail.com, or tweet us at gonkcastpod. Our next episode will be on Chiastic Slide, Envain, and Sickly Sweet, and honestly, we haven't gotten that many emails about these releases yet, so send them in. But we'd also love to hear your thoughts on any release we've already talked about or are going to talk about. Again, that's gonkcastpod@gmail.com. You'll find our email, Twitter, all that stuff in the show notes of every episode. Oh, and one more thing. If you haven't given us a 5-star rate and a review wherever you're listening to this, we'd really appreciate it if you did. Okay, so we actually got the idea to add the Basscad EP to this episode from a few of you who wrote to tell us not to skip it. Listener A. Traeger said, I enjoy the Basscad EP quite a bit. I think the remixes are better than the original track and worth checking out. Generally sounds a lot more Amber-esque. Taz Mix and Basscad Mix are my personal favorites. Listener Eric also recommended the Taz Mix and said, it's a nice chill breakbeat groove built around a loop of this weird bird-like screeching noise. And unlike the rest of the EP, it doesn't really sound anything like Basscad. Sharpieman20 urged us to, quote, listen to it at least once and see if you like it. And listener Marson said, quote, please don't omit the Basscad EP. Very passionate. And added, these remixes are way better than the original song. So Dan, neither of us care much for the Basscad song, again from Incunabula, but based on these listeners' advice, we gave the Basscad EP a few spins, so I'm wondering what you think. Also, I should clarify that we listened to the 4 Autechre remixes of the track that are included on the EP's 1991 to 2002 box set. We skipped the Beaumont, Hanant, and Seafeel remixes. I don't know if I'm pronouncing either of those artists' names correctly, but what did you think of the Basscad EP?
Yeah, I had listened to it, in the past, like, going through the discography kind of thing. But, it was nothing I've ever really dug deep into because, like we said, Basscad, I think, was both of our least favorite songs from Incunabula. But, I enjoyed the songs here, I think more than the original song, like at least a couple of the listeners said. It like sort of... It sort of made it like more interesting. I think one of my like chief complaints of the original track is that vocal sample and stuff. Right. It's just like looping and it just is a little corny. Whereas here on all the remixes, it's either almost non-existent. Like I think it's the Basscad mix. It's really like stretched out and and almost
off time almost.
Yeah, exactly. If I didn't already know the original, if I didn't know what I was listening for, I don't think I would even point it out as a vocal sample. So that was interesting. I definitely think I agree with them and think it was at least worth going through.
Yeah, it really does sound a lot more Amber-esque, and it's funny because when we talked about Amber, I sort of speculated that if Autechre had to remake Incunabula from scratch in 1994, it would have sounded a lot like Amber because it was like as if it started in Incunabula world and then they just like tweaked and messed with everything until it was like really alien and out there, unrecognizable. And it feels like that's pretty much what's going on here. They are all like slower feeling, more like, I don't know, a lot more ambient, a lot more spacious. That first one, the BCDT mix, is kind of just like a better version of the original song.
Yeah,
it's like the least transformed, but they've just kind of like adjusted the mix so that it's a lot more spacious and just like, just doesn't sound like a 1989 like rave up like the original track does. But on that note, it's like you can only really like stretch this so far because they're not messing with the like sounds. They're not like re-recording sounds. They're just kind of like remixing them, obviously. And so it's like, you know what I mean? You can still, it's like not enough to really be in amber territory, even though I get what that listener meant by that.
Yeah, and I agree with that listener. It definitely like sounds more amber-esque, but you're right. You're using the palette of Incunabula, and just so you're still limited by those colors or sounds or whatever. Yeah. But you're using them in a more amber type way, which I agree with what you said, that first one, the BCDT mix, is like really just a better version of that song. It's the like most it's the closest to that original one, but I think just like done quite a bit better. It really, like, as you go through the EP, it's sort of like they really kind of transform almost like in order. I think like the Basscad mix is sort of the like most transformed, and the BCD whatever fuck is the least transformed.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I sort of feel like the Basscad mix is a good example of, it's really very like droney, and it's got these huge bass bombs that are like strongly reminiscent of the track Further off of Amber, when that, like, the ambient ending of that track, but you can just hear that it's kind of like a coming way short to that sound world that they create there, because it is still just like the raw components of a pretty basic song. It's if Autechre is telling the truth that Incunabula is a compilation of older material, I would bet anything that Basscad is the oldest material on Incunabula. But I guess I felt like I strongly agree with a lot of the listeners I just mentioned that the Taz mix is the best track here. It is like the farthest away. Like, they've removed that annoying, like, kind of distorted bell sound, and actually just emphasize like the melodic elements of the track, and sort of change the beat so it's kind of like a groovy trip hop thing, like complete with DJ scratches and stuff at the end. But it's really quite pretty. It's like really, really like a lovely composition, which is like so different from the vibe you get from the original song, which is like blaring distortion that you're supposed to, I guess, jump up and down to. I did feel like the Basscad mix was like pointlessly long. I mean, it's just like it's total dub, like where they're just kind of playing with the delays, and it's like the whole thing is submerged in like low pass filter, and it's like almost 10 minutes. I don't know why at all. But I mean, did you have like a favorite or maybe a least favorite track here?
Yeah, I agree with you and the listeners. I think the Taz mix is the right mix of different from the original, but not as far as the Basscad mix. I liked the Basscad mix. I like dub quite a bit, and I like that reverby kind of thing. But I agree. I mean, it didn't really need to be 9 minutes and 44 seconds. And that one, that one's not on the vinyl, I don't think. I think that one's switched with the double mix and stuff. So
also hilarious how like the release history of this EP, which is like, no matter which a copy you get, you are getting shortchanged in some way, because like something is missing from the CD, from the vinyl, from the EP's box set. Like, on the EP's box set, couldn't they have just put the whole thing with the other remixes and stuff on it? Like, why the hell not?
Yeah, I mean, I get that it's like remixes by other artists, but yeah, exactly. Come on, it'd be nice to have like the definitive version, in one section. I mean, because like, I was listening to this on Spotify, and the Basscad mix isn't even on. I had to go to the box set to listen to that one track. Is a mess.
Yeah, and apparently there's one by like this, the Beaumont Hanant. I've never.
Yeah. There's another remix that's in.
Yeah,
it's in 12/4 time. Yeah,
apparently. But this is vinyl only. I don't think it's ever been released like on CD or digitally. So, I didn't go scrounge around for it, but I would be very, very curious to hear what the hell that sounds like.
Yeah, I had read that. I want to check it out. The 12/4 thing is interesting.
Yeah, very intriguing. Okay, so just to wrap up here, do you think this is kind of like a more worthwhile release than we, originally thought?
I mean, sure. It's definitely a fans only kind of thing. I don't think your average Joe needs to hear this. It's you're a big fan of Autechre, especially if you really like the Amber Incunabula period. It's definitely worth listening to. But that's about as far as it goes, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in the history of Autechre, I guess it is kind of interesting to hear them like messing with incunabulous sounds in amber mode. That's pretty cool. But okay, let's get on to your emails. Dan, do you want to take the first one?
Yeah, so we read most of Brooke from New Zealand's email on our Try Repete episode, but he also had this to share. I really think that the Autechre latecomer must consume it like a snake. Bite off too much at once, listening to the whole discography, and you'll die. You have to swallow it slowly and take months, no years, to digest it. I remember not understanding albums like XI. You guys also mentioned struggling with records like Draft Point 7.30 and Choristus, so did I. Now those releases are some of my absolute favorites, but it took me years. There's so many layers of groove and texture. Now I can't see why I didn't get it straight away. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's so funny because I feel very fortunate, actually, that I got into Autechre before streaming, because I do think it would have killed me if I had like tried to devour this whole thing at once. And it might not be unique to Autechre, but it might be especially difficult for Autechre, if you're a newcomer and you're not like spending some serious time with, individual records. But I mean, do you agree with Brooke's premise here that you should just pick one place and sort of slowly work your way through, as opposed to trying to consume a whole bunch of it at once?
Yeah, I do actually, and I agree with you. I am glad that I got into Autechre before streaming and everything, and I mean I got into it with the part when it was even like a little hard to find some of the releases and stuff online. So it really just out of necessity slowed me down, because I'm real bad about if I find a record I like or an artist or something, I get obsessive and I'll listen to literally everything. And when somebody like Autechre, I think it would make me, if I found them today, and then I went through whatever 60 hours of music or whatever they have, I would probably come out thinking, I like Try Repete, that was it, or something. I think I would disregard some of the tougher releases, XI, like he mentioned, LSEC, which are today some of my favorites. I think I would, those ones that take deep listening and repeated listening. I got a bad habit of, if I don't like something the first couple times, I frequently just move on. I feel like there's so much to get to in the world that that I'll spend my time elsewhere, which often works. But I think I miss out on things, I'm sure, with that technique, and I think I really would here with Autechre.
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, there are records like that kind of period from Confield to Choristus almost that I have not really just focused on one. It's like I'm always like, okay, let's kind of dig in, and I listen to one, I move to the other, and I feel like that's why that period has never clicked with me, and I'm hoping this podcast will change that. It's also funny though, thinking about this email, that I think that Brooke is right, and yet I don't think you really appreciate fully, Autechre until you've gotten the bigger picture, just how vast their discography is and how they're constantly changing. I remember that I can't remember when I guess I got into Autechre, but I know that Choristus was the first record that came out while I was a fan, right? So it must have been 2006, 2007, something like that. And it wasn't until XI that, and I'm they're in my regular rotation all those years, where it just dawned on me, I think Autechre is my favorite band. I just didn't really realize until it just clicked that every time I listen to something of theirs, it is fascinating and, worthwhile. And the journey is so fun. So I don't know. There's also something about don't bite off too much, but it's going to take a while before you really get the whole thing and really see how massive it is. Real quick, I also wanted to ask you, what do you think is the best place to start with Autechre?
I want to say Try Repete, because it's the, probably most famous. It's where I started. So I think it's definitely a good place. But also, I think... I don't know, Incunabula, I think, is sort of more easy listening, if you want to say that, or I don't know. I think in anything Incunabula, Amber, or Try Repete, but I would probably I would probably recommend Try Repete if somebody, sincerely asked me.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wonder. I know that XI was like kind of a big hit, quote unquote, among, just music listeners. I'm sure that a lot of people came to Autechre around that time because that album was getting so hyped. And I wonder if it is kind of like, it does appeal to people who maybe are younger and already like the language of Arca and One O Tricks Point Never and those kind of artists, so that might be like a nice place, like a slightly more familiar place to start before you go back into the 90s if you're some Zoomer or something. But I also wanted to note, it's kind of funny actually that on Rate Your Music, I swear to God, in just the last couple of days, because I check pretty often as I'm preparing for the our upcoming episode, LP5 has moved into first place in the ratings. It's at a 3.8 now. It used to be at a 3.79, which was tied with Confield and Try Repete. But so maybe, I don't know, that's not a bad place to start. And I assume that probably if any new listeners like check Rate Your Music, they might be like, oh, okay, I guess I need to start with LP5.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'm looking at it now. But Try Repete has like double the reviews though.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's true. All right. So on to the next one. We read from listener A. Traeger's email in our last episode as well, but he also shared a quick thought on several of the releases we've covered so far. He said, hot take, never been a fan of Flutter. It's okay, but nothing special to me. Lost has always been my favorite track from the Anti-EP. Wow. On Amber, he said, I took a walk at sunset on the beach once while listening to that album. Fantastic setting for such a dark, expansive, and futuristic sounding record. But my favorite was his Cavity Job experience. He says, around 2001 or so, when I discovered Autechre, I downloaded a bunch of random tracks off Kaza or Morpheus or whatever the peer-to-peer flavor of the day was. Cavity Job was one of the tracks included in the set. For obvious stylistic reasons, Cavity Job stood out from the rest of the tracks, particularly when nestled among tracks from Confield and EP7. So much so that I was convinced it was not really an Autechre track and thought, what jerk labeled this stupid track as an Autechre song? I was very surprised years later to learn it was in fact a legitimate Autechre track. That's so funny because I feel like I had that same experience with, that was how I got into Aphex Twin. I just downloaded their entire discography and some stuff just, you're like, there's no way this is the same artist, but any thoughts on any of the little takes that you mentioned there?
Yeah, I mean, that is like a, I'm going to sound like a boomer here for a minute, but I was doing peer-to-peer, since Napster and stuff. And that really, as annoying as it was, I look back fondly on, downloading a record and getting some joke song or, some like there was always like mislabeled Nirvana songs that were,
right.
Like fucking
Stone Temple Pilots.
Yeah, exactly. And it was always like a little fun gamble. I'd still wonder like how many records do I like not actually know the real rec that I heard just from that. So I fondly look back on that. The other stuff,
I
go ahead.
I like the note about listening to Amber on the beach. I think it's funny because it makes me think of like kind of a claustrophobic feeling, and it makes me think of like some sort of little like space station like on the moon or something, and yet I can also totally feel that vibe of like a huge open ocean and the air and stuff. Weird how that record actually would be fitting for both situations.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at before I started stuttering. But I mean, I think those sort of like feelings like have similar or those kind of places, like being trapped in space or being like at the open ocean or something, are like very similar, even though one's like the ocean is claustrophobic in like the opposite sense, if that makes any sense at all. Like it's too big. I mean, I guess you're on the beach, so I guess you're all right. But I could see listening to Autechre at the beach. Never done it myself, but maybe next time. Live in Florida, so
I'll try.
I'll try.
All right, what's next?
All right, listener Jens, I'm not as enthusiastic about the early stuff as you are, but hearing your takes is really interesting. For me, Chiastic Slide is where they really take off. Anyhow, I just wanted to make sure that you don't miss out my most favorite and bizarre bit of AE trivia for the next episode. It's that time that ZZ Top sampled Second Bad Vilbel. Thoughts on that? Did you know that?
I did not know this. I I'm stunned. Honestly, I listened to the track a couple times on YouTube. It's just like a 2-minute little like jam where, I don't assume that ZZ Top knows Autechre, but whoever like produced this track for them must have heard it or something. And yeah, it's just got that kind of like breakbeat running through it. And there's kind of like a little horn workout and then like a sick little guitar solo, bluesy guitar solo over the thing. And I don't know, it just seems like the cringiest. This is from an album that came out in 1999. It's called XXX. Danny Brown must have stolen his album title from the top, but it's just clearly like this is like peak 90s, like a lot of like dad rockers and stuff, even a few years too late. We're like, what's this electronic stuff that all the kids are into, and so there's that element, but also the element that we both decided that Second Bad Vilbel, the worst part about it is that kind of generic breakbeat, and it's almost perfect that a group like ZZ Top felt comfortable enough with that beat to turn it into like a blues rock track.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, when I read this email, I honestly thought that they were maybe trying to fuck with us, drop some false info in. So I Googled it first just to make sure, before I wrote back. But yeah, that's nuts. I think I only know the ZZ Top songs that are on the radio, so I had never heard this one before, but I listened to it, and it was not like at all what I expected. But I guess I didn't expect ZZ Top was sampling anything, But that's strange. I don't know. Hopefully they made some money off it, I guess.
Yeah, hopefully. All right, next email. Here is a sign theory from listener Ross. This is a little long, but bear with me. Ross says, dedicated AE fan for life. I've been a Warp Records fan for quite a while now and feel like I've become pretty good at predicting their movements in terms of announcements, release schedules, etc. I'm a firm believer in the second album theory, and I know this is purely conjecture, but following the rollout of Sign, I feel I have an idea on when the companion record will be released. I'm certain it'll be released this year. Japanese record store Beat Inc. are currently running what they're calling the Warp 2020 campaign, teasing 4 big Warp releases this year. The first was a Japanese exclusive repressing of Polygon Window's Surfing on Sine Waves. Next was the new record from Oneohtrix Point Never. And third was our very own Autechre with Sign. Now there's still a 4th mysterious record to be unveiled. I might be leaping to conclusions here, but with all the hints we've been given, it only makes sense for this final major Warp release to be the next AE record. I know Aphex is currently teasing a release related to a synthesizer at the moment, but Warp have posted nothing on the matter, so I imagine it has nothing to do with them. And, by the way, that's been confirmed now since this listener wrote in, because it is just a stupid synthesizer. Anyway, he says, my prediction is that the companion record will be announced on November 4th, giving Sign time to exist as its own entity. Following the release schedule of Sign, this would then mean that the companion record would be released on December 18th with an album broadcast on the 11th. I feel like a complete madman just typing all this out, but I truly believe this. It just all makes too much sense to me. You were a little bit more skeptical than me. I'm so primed and ready to believe. And in fact, there's a new rumor now that it's going to be called Plus and is going to drop on 11/20. But I don't know. Does any of this convince you, make you more hopeful, Dan?
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just the fact that I've been a Kanye fan for a long time, and I've gotten so burned by these, the album's coming out, there all these, the reading the star signs or whatever, and you're figuring it out. I'll believe it when it gets announced if it does. I just kind of doubt Warp or Autechre would step on their own promotion, Sign just came out, their Warp's still posting about it, on their social media accounts and everything. It's just it seems weird to just say, next, but I mean, in the past they have, dropped EPs, within months of a record. Yeah. And I mean, this could just be an EP, we just because it's on a 12-inch or something, especially being Autechre doesn't really mean anything. So I don't know. I that one new rumor, which for the record, I tweeted it so you could see it on our Twitter. It's like somebody saying their friend works at a record store, which is, I mean,
And they don't really offer like any new like evidence. They're just like, oh, the record cover is green, which everybody like has already decided is true.
You know, and supposedly, if we're recording this on is it Tuesday? I'm on vacation this week.
Yeah.
Okay, it's Tuesday. So it's Tuesday night, and the thing supposedly says that it'll be announced tomorrow, which would be Wednesday. I don't know when you're listening to this, but so maybe they'll prove me wrong. I hope they do. I mean, honestly, I hope
to this. Yeah, there might even be an announcement, and we might look like idiots. But
yeah, exactly. I mean, I hope we do. Yeah, I always take a new Autechre record, but I'm very doubtful. Maybe first quarter 2021 or something. Give Sign enough time to breathe. I mean, like the email says. I think I think his theory is a little more likely, saying late December, mid-December. I just don't see them stepping on their own promotion that way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, because it's like when these rumors were first coming out, there were people saying like, oh, it's going to be a December release and stuff, and I was like, that makes sense to me. They're like companion records, but they're spaced out a little bit. But now that we're already approaching November, I'm like, damn, it's like barely been any time since Sign came out. And if they had, okay, a December release is one thing, but if these rumors say that it's going to be announced like this week, then that's going to step all over the Sign hype, I think. So, yeah, I would, based on nothing at all, just put my money on, spring of next year. But yeah, it being called Plus really could mean that it's an EP. So I don't know, but I appreciate the speculation, the long and detailed speculation from Ross here. Thanks a lot. What's next?
All right, listener Brandon, he says, I just wanted to let you know that the last song on Try Repetate isn't a typo. It's based on the rare Boss delay sample hardware called the Boss RSD10. It allows pitch inputs to control sample and delay rates via quarter-inch cables. I own one, and it's a beast. They probably used the stuttering echo effects made possible by playing different low-key sequences to give the album a certain sound.
That's cool. That's cool to know. I didn't know that. Yeah, I think that it's cool that we haven't really talked about it enough, but there is a certain like element of gear worship to Autechre. You know how we really like that about like Sun and Boris and stuff, and like just drone and ambient is there's a lot of gear worship in those cultures, and Autechre has a tinge of that, because sometimes tracks are named after effects or equipment and stuff, and sometimes they seem like they're just explorations of the possibilities of like one patch or something like that, and I think that's cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess if people didn't listen, I thought it was because the A is right next to the S, and so radio just a typo. But I mean, that's really cool to like see that and change it to the 10 to IO and whatnot. Right. But I did look at that effect. I don't get too much into gear worship here, but I did look into that thing, and it is cool as hell. I don't know if you looked it up, but it reminds me of, and no one will care about this but me and you, but it reminds me of what we used to do with the those Digitech digital delays a lot. But don't worry, I got some irons in the fire on eBay and stuff. I'm looking on getting one.
Okay, all right. So. Well, this next email is actually a little bit related to what I was just saying, so I'll move ahead. It's from Tomas from Hungary. He says, here is just a little hint to the word piezo. We couldn't figure out how to pronounce that track title from Amber, but I believe it is piezo. And Tomas directs us to Wikipedia. Quote, the word piezoelectricity means electricity resulting from pressure and latent heat. It is derived from the Greek word piesin or pisine, which means to squeeze or press, and electron, which means amber, holy shit, an ancient source of electric charge. Tomas says, does this strengthen your theory that amber is about stretching and squeezing time electrically? Thank you for asking, Tomas. I think it does. The Gabe Overthinks It portion of the Amber podcast was me saying there's something about stretching time and warping time and stuff. And there is a lot of just sounds of electricity on that. And I was thinking, it's like, what is electronic music but electricity being squeezed and twisted in different ways? It's kind of fitting because I was saying that Try Repetate is almost like an album about the machinery that makes music. And hey, piezoelectricity, according to Wikipedia, is used in amplification pickups for some guitars, triggers in most modern electronic drums. How good is my theory looking now, Dan?
Yeah, it's looking good. It's also the thing that is a contact mic, which I think I said on the show. Also, good, good going figuring out how to say it. I remember I said it with gusto, like I knew what I was talking about. Yeah, I was fucking wrong as hell. But no, I mean, yeah, your theory looking good. I mean, that honestly is pretty. I mean, it literally says the word amber in the thing. I thought you were maybe getting a little conspiratorial, but
right.
You're the QAnon of Autechre.
right. Except I'm right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. That's super interesting. It's interesting because it's like, we were talking about how fun it is. Like, Autechre album titles and song titles, they feel like little clues, but you'll never figure it out. I feel like this is actually like a legitimate clue that you could figure out. It's like
yeah, exactly. Shit. Yeah, and I mean, I'll just say right now, anybody's got any? I love trivia. I love gear things. I love things like that. If you got any of this stuff, send it over. You're not bothering me at all. I eat that shit up. So GONKCASTpod@gmail.com.
Yeah, all right. We got one more email, right?
Yeah, last one. Listener Darren, I think Try Repeté shares the same melodic ideas as the first two albums, although fleshed out more and a tad more direct and upbeat, but still very analog sounds in the melodies and bass lines. Lots of Juno 106 throughout the album, especially in the Uto, where it's the main synth sound and it sounds like the chorus effect is in overdrive, but where it really departs is in the drum programming. The earlier records' beats were very recognizable, like, oh, there's a 606 pattern, etc. But in Try Repeté, they started building beats from samples as well as drum machines, so it was unique and very different from the other Warp artists at the time. The sound sources were more like modem dial-up buzzes, lots of weird fizzing, glitching electronic signals, but despite this new experimentation with percussion, it still had a hip-hop and electro vibe. Just the sounds are being bent into weirder shapes. Hell, they even made a cowbell sound like it was from another dimension on CPAC. This was the beginning of them sounding like breakdancing robots from the future.
Yeah, this is a great point, I think, because, it's true, actually, that the melodic sounds on Try Repeté are not that, wholly original. They're still kind of like, using recognizable synth sounds and stuff a lot of the time. It's the percussion that is like so insanely inventive, and fortunately, it's like the percussion that is the star of the show on Try Repeté, as we mentioned, to the point where some people, don't even remember that there's much melody on the record at all. So I think that's a great point. It actually it gives it something like a classic feel, because it does have some of these kind of like classic synth sounds that we love about Incunabula and Amber, but simultaneously just wholly, brand new sounds that are just kind of blowing your mind. Also really like that, one observation I'm having, I don't want to spoil because, we're preparing already for our chiastic slide episode, but it's like, eventually we're going to get to the point where it's like sounds are hard to even compare to real things,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
On like, the early albums, it's like, oh, this is a recognizable synth, this is a recognizable drum machine. Then you get into the territory with Try Repeté where it's like, this sounds like a modem buzzing, or, wires fizzing, or, a welding arm turning. But then you're going to get into like, this sounds like I have no idea how to explain it. You know what I mean? What do you think about this email here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point, and it really is like one of the things I like about Try Repeté. Some of my complaints about Incunabula were, I knew what drum machine that was. I like knew the sound. I recognized them. Which from Autechre, that's not really, exactly what I want. I want that sound design thing. And here, you're still kind of anchored with using those, sort of recognizable sense, like the Juno and everything. But yeah, the percussion is this like kind of mix of new and old and, everything. I think it really is the beginning of them, becoming like sound designers more than, anything else.
Yeah, but it's not like, like you said, it's not like a knock on Tri-Repete.
No, not at all.
It's the thing that makes it special, because it's kind of like a interesting halfway point between like the past and the future, and yeah, it's gonna change, like I was saying, but Tri-Repete is like just a special moment in music that, like I've said on the episode, like nothing quite sounds like it, nothing quite scratches the itch of when you're in a Tri-Repete mood.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you've got any Autechre opinions, hot takes, trivia to share,